Hey guys, welcome back to our YouTube channel. Today we're going to be doing a very special video, top 10 carnivore diet mistakes. So some of these mistakes, if not all, I learned throughout my journey as a carnivore. It's been almost 3 years and I think that I have compiled a list of 10 things that can help you on your journey if you're just starting out or if you're somewhere in the middle of your journey. Maybe this will be helpful to you as well. So number one carnivore diet mistake is not eating enough food. So at first, when I started, from my personal experience, I was not eating enough. I went from a standard American diet to a strict carnivore diet. I went cold turkey. So you can imagine what my plate portions looked like, going from a standard American diet, having a full plate of food, potatoes, salad, maybe a little chicken breast, to just a little piece of meat. So I learned this lesson the hard way because I actually lost my period the first 3 months going on carnivore. Um, I was not eating enough. And this also leads me into the second carnivore mistake, which I will kind of tie them in together. So not eating enough and not eating enough fat. Those two are very, very important on carnivore, no matter what diet you're transitioning from. Whether you're transitioning from a standard American diet or from a ketogenic diet, paleo, your plate is going to look a lot different once you transition to carnivore. I find that during the transition phase, especially if you're going cold turkey and you're transitioning into a strict carnivore diet, you will be a little bit confused about what it really means to be hungry. You're going to question, am I hungry? Have I eaten enough? And that may mean that you're going to eat a little bit more than usual at the beginning until you really, really tap into your hunger cues and your satiation cues. So this can take a little while. And what you eat in your first month of carnivore will be completely different than what you eat a year or 2 years down the line. For example, I used to eat so much more meat than I do now. Actually, I think I'm much more mindful of what I'm consuming now. Whereas when I first started, I was like so hungry. It was like someone unleashed a beast, and I was just consuming all of the nutrients and all of the meat that my body had been deprived of for so long. So I really do encourage you guys, if you're just starting out, to make sure that you're eating enough and make sure that you're eating enough fat. I mentioned before that I had lost my period on the first 3 months of carnivore, and I think that was simply because I was not eating enough per meal, and I was also not eating enough fat. As soon as I increased the amount of food and increased the fat in my meals, my period came back within 12 days. So I went from eating a strip loin for breakfast and a strip loin for dinner to adding some salmon and egg yolks with those meals, and then actually increasing my fat intake through the egg yolks. And I bought the chunky fat from my butcher, and then I would dice it up into little cubes and fry it. I didn't have an air fryer at first, but I would fry it in a frying pan, fry the fat in a frying pan. And that was kind of what really, really turned things around for me and helped me to get my period back. So healthy fats are super important. And I think for far too long, we've been told to stay away from fat, and that fat makes us gain weight. Fat clogs your arteries. Now, I mean, if you're watching this video, you probably have come to learn that all of that is not true. It's far from the truth. Fat doesn't make you fat. Fat doesn't clog your arteries. Our brain actually needs fat, and fat is actually like one of the best forms of hydration. So I find that when I'm eating a lot of animal fats, I don't require as much water, which is so, so fascinating. So yes, make sure you're eating enough, and that can look different for every person. And also make sure you're getting enough animal fats in. That can be high fat ground beef, bone marrow, egg yolks, bacon, raw butter. All of those are good choices for fats. One thing to note, if you're not eating enough during your meals, or if you're not eating enough fat, you may feel sluggish, tired, low energy. So those could be a couple signs that you're not eating enough during your meals or that you're not eating enough fat. When I eat enough and when I eat enough fat, I have energy for days. So it's kind of like my fuel. Fat is fuel. All right, carnivore diet mistake number 3, not eating enough salt. So this is something that I learned early on throughout my carnivore journey because I started getting intense leg cramps in the middle of the night. So what I would do is I quickly learned that I had to invest in a really good quality salt. As many of you know, I only use Redmond's Real Salt. I love their salt. It's high quality, super flavorful. They've got a couple of different consistencies, super coarse, one that's really fine, and then one kosher salt that's in the middle. That one's my favorite. So when I first started out, I think because it was a pretty intense transition phase for me as I went cold turkey, I would put a lot of salt in my water and I would just carry that water around with me and drink it. Now I don't focus so much on how much salt I'm getting. I just, salt my food liberally as much as I want. Salt is the only condiment that I use, so I do like to use a lot of it. But I no longer get any leg cramps, so I wonder maybe that's because I've completely transitioned now. I'm almost 3 years in. I don't have any of those issues. But when you're first starting out, do not be afraid of the salt. Also, another point to add to all of this kind of goes hand in hand with my last 3 carnivore mistakes: not enough food, not enough fat, not enough salt. If you're just starting off on the carnivore diet and you feel sluggish, you may experience some kind of flu-like symptoms that can be called the keto flu. So I actually experienced this on the 7th day of carnivore. I started feeling extremely tired, lethargic, and I got this rash on my chin and on my chest and on my back. And it was like a rash that I've never seen before. It was like acne, but itchy and cystic. So like really, really, really bumpy, red flaming bumps. And I was like, oh my God, what the heck is going on? I never had something like that before. So I asked my good friend Adam, who's an expert in this field, and I was like, what do I do? What's going on? He's like, I think that's the keto flu. I think you have a keto rash. So what he recommended I do was buy a little sheep yogurt, pasteurized. It was all that I could find, and you guys know how I feel about pasteurized dairy. I'm not really for it, but at the time I was just starting out. I really didn't want to have these rashes all over my face. So I bought the pasteurized sheep yogurt, and Adam told me after every meal, take 1 or 2 teaspoons of the sheep yogurt. I kid you not, within 24 hours, my keto rash just sucked itself back in. It just went away. And I think that was because I had been 7 days completely zero carb for the first time in my life. And I was going from a very, very high carb diet. So my body was like, whoa, ketosis, what is this? What's going on? So it just kind of maybe was like eliminating toxins out. I don't know, guys. I don't know the science behind all that. But as soon as I had a little bit of sheep yogurt, it has some carbs, so it kicked me out of ketosis and my rash went away. And then I was able to just, quietly, slowly continue the carnivore diet, eating only meat, a little bit of salmon. But just a tip for you guys: if you have any keto rash, get a little bit of yogurt, kick you out of that ketosis. Don't worry so much about being out of ketosis. You'll get back into it. But yes, that was just my little side note tip. Carnivore diet mistake number 4 is snacking. Snacking all the time. I'm here to tell you, it's not normal. We're all guilty of it in one way, shape, or form, but it's not normal. If you are fully satiated, full from your meals, you will not need to snack. Sure, you can go in the fridge and, find two yummy little pieces of bacon, or, a little leftover hamburger, you take a bite, but to constantly have little snacks all over, available, ready at all costs, is a sign that perhaps you're not eating enough during your meals, you're not eating enough fat during your meals. So I just want you guys to keep that in mind. I mean, think of it from an ancestral point of view. Our ancestors were not snacking all the time. They had their meals, and those meals would keep them full throughout the day until their next meal. I would really, really encourage you to consider, when you think about snacking, am I really hungry, or am I just bored, or am I just thirsty? Those are three things. I think that this is a whole another topic of conversation that we could get into, and I'm very guilty of this, so I'm placing no judgment on anyone. But a lot of the times when we want to snack, or when we want to go to the fridge, I always ask myself, am I trying to distract myself from dealing with something? Am I, you know, using this as a coping mechanism? Is there something I'm avoiding dealing with? So these are all things to consider. I know that the carnivore diet is yummy, it's delicious. There's so many wonderful meal ideas snack ideas that we can come up with, but the truth of the matter is we should not be snacking throughout the day. Our meals should suffice us until the next meal. Carnivore diet mistake number 5 is not fully committing to the carnivore diet and then saying that the carnivore diet is not working for you. So I'm a huge advocate for 30 days carnivore. Whatever you decide to do past that 30 days is totally up to you. I encourage trying to reintroduce foods, as I have, but I waited a lot more than 30 days. I think I waited like 2 years before I reintroduced food. But in order to give something a try and a full commitment, I do say that 30 days is an awesome allotment of days, because it allows your body to feel the full benefits. I meet a lot of people, even people in my family, who wanted to try the carnivore diet, and they'd start off really strong first 10 days, but then, they would take a bite of an apple, or they'd have a little piece of the salad with their steak, and then they would say that the carnivore diet is not working for them. So that's not really giving it a full 100% try, because you don't know what these other foods that you're eating, how they're going to be impacting your body. If we're going to do carnivore, we're going to do carnivore, and that means meat only animal-based foods. So this brings me to my 6th carnivore diet mistake, and that is not having a smooth transition. And that can mean different things for different people. For example, I went cold turkey. It was a rough transition, but I wouldn't change it. I wouldn't have it any other way. I think that if someone was to tell me, would you do the same thing all over again? Would you go cold turkey? I would say yes, but that's me. For other people, perhaps it would be better if they didn't go cold turkey, and instead they first went gluten-free, removed all processed foods, processed carbs, processed sugar, and then removed certain types of vegetables, and then gradually just reintroduced more and more meat until they became carnivore. So kind of like a harm reduction. That can be a little bit easier mentally, physically, altogether. It can be a smoother transition. It's not up to me to decide what transition works best for you, whether you can handle going cold turkey, whether you want to go keto first, or whether you just want to remove gluten-free foods first. You have to make that decision for yourself, but knowing yourself best and making that decision will make this carnivore experience much more fun, more easy, and just overall like a smoother transition. So I think that's something that a lot of people don't take in mind. For me, especially, I get very excited and sometimes I'm a little bit impulsive. So when I found out about the carnivore diet, I literally started it the next day, whereas that might not work for most people. Sometimes you need to do your research, take a step back, reflect, and see what would serve you best. And the seventh carnivore diet mistake is copying exactly what everybody else is doing. I think we can all be guilty of this because we all start somewhere and usually we are inspired by others. When I first started out, I was definitely inspired by Michaela Peterson. She was eating mostly steak. I was definitely inspired by Sean Baker, mostly steak. So I ate a whole lot of steak, but I find that the best method that has worked for me is to learn a little bit from everybody and take bits and pieces and see what works for you. So I still eat a lot of steak, but I also take a lot from the strong sisters and I eat my organ meats. I listen to Paleo Medicina. In Hungary, they talk a lot about eating high quality animal fat. I learn from them. Here and there, I may have a little bit of fruit. That's some Paul Saladino for you. So I take bits and pieces. I trial and error on myself because I am my best experiment. I see how I feel and I go from there. But I would definitely advocate against, having a fixed mentality and just seeing someone, only one person as, doing it the right way, because that way, we're all very different. I do believe that we should all be consuming meat as humans. Most of us, if not all, should be consuming meat. But I do think that there's not a one size fits all. So not everybody, I'm not going to tell everybody to eat steak. I'm not going to tell everybody to eat organ meats, only organ meats. I think that we can all learn from each other instead of, just copying what one person does and hoping that it'll work for us. Just have an open mind and we can all learn from each other. The eighth carnivore diet mistake is not sourcing your meat. So this is something that I struggled with in the beginning. I was like a chicken running with my head cut off from butcher to butcher, grocery store to grocery store. And had I been more prepared, I would have definitely sourced my farmer. And that's what I did later on. And it made the transition, it made the experience so much easier, so much more streamlined. But as I mentioned before, sometimes I can be impulsive and just dive into things and want to get to the answer right away. But it's all part of the learning experience, so I don't regret it. But if you're just starting out, I would highly recommend do your due diligence, do your research, source your food, talk to your local farmers, get different prices, see where you can get the best eggs, the best cheese, raw cheese only if possible, of course. And yeah, just do your research because it'll pay off in the long run and you will save a lot of money. The ninth carnivore diet mistake is not being socially prepared. So when I first started the carnivore diet, I was faced with a lot of moments where we had family outings or work lunches, work dinners with the coworkers, and I was not prepared. I was not prepared to be, number one, triggered by all of the foods around me. Two, I didn't know what to order if we were going out to eat. Or three, I didn't know what I could bring. Should I bring food that I could share with the rest? Should I just bring food for myself? So these are all things that you have to take into account. Right now, this carnivore diet mistake, not being socially prepared, it's a non-issue for me because I always come prepared. But at the beginning, it can be a little bit challenging, and especially I find that the social aspect of it is more challenging than the food itself. It's kind of having to feel like you have to explain yourself to people why you're doing this diet, why you're not eating any vegetables. So, mentally prepare for that. I feel like I could do an entire video on the social aspect of going carnivore and how that affects your relationships with friends and family. But if you're going to be going to an event, bring your own food. If there's a barbecue, bring your meat. If there's no barbecue, you know, make some eggs, make some bacon, bring little snacks that you could share with others, prosciutto, cheese, make a little platter, go prepared. I find it is always a little bit more difficult to people say eat before you go out. That's fine. You can eat before you go out, but then you'll kind of just be standing there and be that awkward turtle who already ate. And then people kind of ask you questions like, oh, did you already eat? So I always find it's better if you just bring a little something with you, whether you share it with others or not. Okay, and the final number 10, 10th carnivore diet mistake, and this kind of may seem unrelated, but I think that this is the biggest lesson that I've learned in my almost 3 years being carnivore, is sunlight, sleep, and movement. Are you getting enough sunlight in your eyes, especially morning sunlight and sunset sunlight? Are you getting enough sleep? And with that, I would have to add, are you shutting off your technology at night? I try to shut off my technology past sunset. Am I successful in it? Not always. I'm not perfect. I gotta check that Instagram, gotta reply to the YouTube comments. But I do find that when I turn off my phone, as soon as the sun sets, I sleep better, I wake up better, my mood is better. I don't have that artificial light in my eyes, confusing my brain, telling me that it's not time for bed. And then the last one is, are you getting enough movement? And I don't necessarily mean are you going to the gym, but are you getting a good amount of steps in? Are you kind of doing any natural movement? Are you doing any cleaning around the house? Are you lifting anything? Any natural movement is good, and you need to exert energy. So if you got your sunlight, your sleep, and your movement in right, and you're eating animal based and kind of avoiding all of the other 9 mistakes that I mentioned, you should be well on your way to achieving true optimal health. I hope this was helpful, and I really appreciate you guys watching my videos. Please let me know if there's anything that you want to know. I've been thinking about doing a live Q&A on YouTube. Drop a comment below. Let me know if that's something you'd be interested in. I could do the Q&A with Daniel. You guys can ask us any questions that you're interested in knowing. Let me know if that's something you'd be interested in. And I hope you enjoyed the other 2 videos on the screen. Have an awesome weekend.